Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. I'm a compliance evangelist, and I'd like to welcome you to a special 5-part podcast series sponsored jointly by Skillsoft and StoneTurn entitled Partnership of Products and Services for Your Compliance Program. In this podcast series, we consider the code of conduct to risk assessments to continuous improvement in a best practices compliance program with representatives of Skillsoft and StoneTurn. I know you'll enjoy it. And now a word about our two sponsors. Skillsoft. Skillsoft's compliance solutions provide legal, ethics, and workplace safety training through a full suite of customizable compliance training options. Skillsoft partners with industry-leading subject matter experts to develop accurate and engaging courseware and videos available in over 30 languages. To learn more about how Skillsoft can help your organization meet regulatory requirements and mitigate risk, visit skillsoft.com/compliance. StoneTurn. Who do you turn to when you need assistance navigating the emerging risks from the pandemic or enhancing your compliance program? Who do you turn to for on-demand compliance resources and expertise? Turn to us, StoneTurn. Since 2004, council corporations and government agencies have turned to global advisory firm StoneTurn when facing their greatest challenges. Make StoneTurn the first place you turn for advice on regulatory, risk and compliance issues, investigations, and business disputes. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, back for another episode, and today I have with me Jamen Tyler. Jamen is Managing Director at StoneTurn and a fellow Wolverine, so go Blue.
Go Blue.
First of all, welcome, and thanks so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
So, Jamen, we're going to take up risk assessments, and I was wondering, many compliance practitioners still struggle with this basic component and building block of an effective compliance program. Could you maybe start off by giving us your top 5 tips for conducting an effective risk assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing that we recommend that everyone think about when they're putting together risk assessments is really thinking about all of your risks. So typically we think about risks as falling into kind of 4 buckets: financial, operational, legal/regulatory, and reputational. Most companies are pretty well versed in conducting risk assessments for financial and operational risks, but legal, regulatory, and reputational can be just as harmful as either of the financial or operational risks as well. So we also recommend that people think critically about those 2 issues in addition to the kind of more traditional financial and operational risks. Also considering the scope. So scoping a risk assessment is really crucial. Conducting a holistic risk assessment of the entire operations that consider all the risks, that's ideal, but it can kind of be impractical for a lot of companies to do. So targeting specific risk areas, whether it's a particular risk type, a particular kind of subject matter, regulatory area, even breaking it down to specific geographies or business units, can be both more efficient and can help make sure that you're actually conducting risk assessments on a timely basis. We also always recommend leveraging data. A lot of companies now have these great enterprise resource management systems and other reporting tools. Some may have external data analytics that they use in their operations. So these can be extremely helpful in the risk assessments. Things like accounting reviews, whistleblower reports, third-party management tools. They provide the sort of real-time data that can reveal the sorts of hotspots for potential issues. So always making sure that you're leveraging that information is really key. Connecting with the right stakeholders is number 4. So you want to make sure that you're always talking with individuals with kind of the most knowledge about your company's operations, how it's actually, what practices are actually on the ground, as well as what the compliance culture is really like. This is going to depend a lot on the scope of your risk assessment. but it will typically include senior management, individuals from legal, finance, internal audit, human resources, communications, marketing, all sorts of areas. So you really want to think critically about what the types of risks you're reviewing for, and who would be the type of people in which roles would really have the most knowledge about what's actually going on the ground. Finally, putting your findings into practice. We found a lot of companies, even if they have really great risk assessment processes, they put together these great reports and then they just kind of sit there. This obviously isn't enough. It's not enough to just identify risks. You really have to address them. You should be always using the risk assessment findings to benchmark and evaluate your compliance program so that you can develop enhancements and improvements going forward. By reviewing also the changes that you make, you can also assess how well those changes actually worked when you conduct your next risk assessment.
One of the additional challenges that many compliance practitioners are finding in this era of COVID-19 is actually how can you still do the robust, fulsome risk assessment that you detailed during this time? I assume you guys have had to face that challenge. How do you advise clients who are actually engaged in a risk assessment when in many ways it has to be done virtually now?
Yeah, it's definitely tricky for sure. I mean, most people, when they think of conducting risk assessments, it's very much conducted on the ground, reviewing, doing on-site visits, talking with people in person. But you can still absolutely do risk assessments remotely, and you should be. Part of what you may have to do is reassess the scope. There are certain types of risk assessments that you may not be able to do right now. And to the extent that a risk assessment does rely on kind of in-person evaluations, you may need to rethink how you do that, and how you might be able to leverage kind of virtual and like webcasting, that sort of thing. You may also just need to evaluate whether these are things that you can push off, or whether you need to kind of rescope and refocus the risk assessments themselves. But as I mentioned, technology is really helpful. I mean, we're all using and getting really used to meeting with people over Zoom. So interviews typically are a very important part of risk assessments, and we can absolutely do them remotely now. Documents should also be available electronically. So to the extent that you're relying on the sort of reports and financial information, most of that is typically available online, we're finding. If it's not, you may have to, designate one or two people to maybe scan documents on site and send those to the rest of the team. But for the most part, the information is generally available. It may just take a little bit longer to identify where it is. And again, you may need to evaluate whether you can do site visits via webcam or some other way. You may need to get a little creative with how you're using technology. But you can also use internal company data. A lot of information that one might gain during the risk assessment process, it may be available elsewhere. And so, again, this is sort of goes back to connecting with the right people, talking to the folks in finance and accounting, IT, finding out what information already exists that you can leverage that you may have otherwise done through kind of more on the ground type reviews. It's also really, really critical, though, at this point to communicate internally the importance of these risk assessments, especially to employees who may not typically have been helping you out quite as much, but now because you do have to leverage these other kind of sources of information, or you may need to talk with different people, they may be new to this, and it's very important to kind of stress the importance of these risk assessment processes and explain to them why their responsiveness and candor is really critical to the process. Finally, leverage those materials that already exist. You may already have information about risks in your industry or geography or business line. These can be both internal and external as well. And you should also think critically about, the new risks that have arisen during COVID-19. And these can help supplement the interviews and other information that you collect during your risk assessment process.
Jamen, as you know, we've had two major releases of information from the Department of Justice and Securities and Exchange Commission literally over the past 6 weeks. June 1 was the 2020 update to the evaluation of corporate compliance programs. On July 2 was the FCPA Resources Guide, second edition. I wanted to ask you, in reference to those documents, that certainly in the 2020 update, the DOJ spent a fair amount of time talking about risk assessments. I think we all understood the importance of a risk assessment, but my sense was they were really focused more on how a company would use a risk assessment. Did they use that as the basis for continuous monitoring or continuous improvement? Did they incorporate that into their strategic planning? What did you see in one or both of those documents around risk assessments that probably added to their importance?
Well, I think one of the key things that have been stressed, especially in these 2020 updates, is that it's not enough to do, one risk assessment every year or every few years and think that that's enough. It's really something the DOJ really wants to see more than just a sort of snapshot in time approach. They want companies to be continuously reviewing information as it comes in and reevaluating risks as things change in real time. So this includes not only looking at risks within your organization, but also externally. Obviously, being aware of what's going on in your industry, what risks are you're seeing or enforcement actions that you're seeing against companies that are similar to yours, either, in the same business line, operating in the same geographical spaces, those that rely on similar types of vendors and suppliers. The DOJ really wants companies to pay attention to what's going on, and also obviously pay attention to what's going on in their companies as well. You should make sure you have a robust whistleblower hotline that allows you to see what people are communicating internally. Your investigations procedure should include a review of what's going on and why things are occurring, so that you can identify potential new risks that are developing or ways in which your risk profile may be changing. And then, of course, as you alluded to, making sure that you take these lessons learned from incidents both within your organization and externally, and are integrating those lessons learned into enhancements to your program. So to the extent that controls or procedures may need to be tweaked or changed, or even new procedures or controls developed, you should be doing this on an ongoing basis. It's not enough anymore to just be doing this kind of a once a year basis.
Jamen, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time, but I was wondering if listeners wanted more information on any of the topics you've talked about in this podcast. Where can they go?
Absolutely. So you can find us online at StoneTurn.com. I'm also available on LinkedIn. And I'm sure they'll be able to find my name is a little odd, but they'll be able to find that online as well.
Jamen, thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
All right. Thanks so much.
This is Tom Fox again. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of our special 5-part podcast series on the products and services for your compliance program, sponsored jointly by Skillsoft and StoneTurn. I have linked to the StoneTurn and Skillsoft website in the show notes, so check out those websites for more information. Additionally, if you enjoyed today's podcast, I want to let you know about an upcoming webinar both Skillsoft and StoneTurn are hosting. The webinar, entitled Evolving Your Compliance Program, will be held on Wednesday, September 23. We'll explore how companies are leveraging data and information to improve and evolve their compliance programs. Check out the show notes in this episode to sign up, register, and obtain more information. I hope you'll join us again for another episode of this special 5-part series, which is a special production of the Compliance Podcast Network. Thanks so much for listening, and I look forward to visiting with you again.